There are a few little tips and tricks to animating lines, bars, and pie charts. And many times, those techniques are a little dependent on your original source files. So let's check them out.
In my After Effects project, notice it's completely empty. So I want to start by importing a layered Photoshop document. So double-click in your project panel and navigate in your exercise files to the Assets folder. In there, I want you to go to the 04_PSD folder and then click once under the 0202 extracted ae.psd file. Then go down under Import As and change the pull down from Footage to Composition Retain Layer Sizes. Make sure Photoshop Sequence is not selected and then click Open. It's going to give me a dialog box making sure that I still want to import it as a composition retaining layer sizes, but I can also make sure that any layer styles I've added are also imported as editable elements. Now we can just leave that set up the way it is and click OK. And now you'll see if I expand this lower folder, I've got each of the individual layers from my layered Photoshop document. If I collapse that and then double click on the composition, you can see here are all the layers in my timeline, and here's my composition panel. Now, it's important to note that this graphic was actually created from a flattened JPEG. Okay, we just used Photoshop to isolate each of the different shapes. So if I select layer 1 here for my snow year, I can turn the visibility off and on, and you can see that's that darkened area up here. Now, there is some interoperability between Photoshop and After Effects. To better show you how that works, what we'll do is just select layer 1 and press Command-E on the Mac or Control-E on Windows to edit the original file inside of Photoshop. So once it opens in Photoshop, make sure you're in the Essentials layout. Go to the upper right-hand corner and make sure Essentials is selected, and you may need to reset your Essentials workspace. Okay, if we look at the Layers panel in the lower right corner, notice I have several layers, and I can toggle the visibility of each layer off and on, just like I did in After Effects. Now, I want to add a little bit of color to my snow year here. So with the snow year layer selected, go down to the bottom and click the FX button. This will add a layer style. So here, I want to go ahead and add a slight color overlay. So we'll add color overlay. And the last color I chose was yellow, and it was a multiply blend mode. So let's actually click on that. And I just want to choose a slightly different blue. So with the color picker open, if I hover over the composition, notice I get an eyedropper, so I could just sample a different blue. And then when I click OK, now I've got a different blue that I can blend into my shape. Now I won't really see much of it until I increase the opacity and change the blend mode. So let's change the blend mode to normal. And now here you can see I've just sort of darkened that up to a little bit more of a navy color. If I change the blend mode to something like multiply, then it actually blends the two different elements together to create that super dark blue. So I don't quite want multiply. Let's click through and see maybe if we choose hard light and then decrease the opacity there a little bit, if that makes a difference. It does, it's just not anything too major. Here, let's change that color under hard light. I'll just change it to kind of a lighter greenish color. There we go. Here we could rotate the hue around. Okay, so when I click OK, it's hard light, and it's this lighter color. It's about 49% opacity, and I can click OK. Now, of course, this doesn't match our legend up here, but that's perfectly fine because I just want to show you how we can stylize this using color overlay. Let's say I wanted to give it a little more dimension. I could come down here and I could click on the effect and choose something like drop shadow. And with a drop shadow, now it actually looks like it's popping off of the background there a little bit. Let's change the angle so it's kind of angled up and not as much down. And we'll decrease the opacity to something more like 68%. And we can adjust the size. Let's bring the size to about 16 pixels. And the distance, we'll tighten that up to be more like 6. Okay. So I can click OK. Now let's say I like these effects and I want to apply them to the layer below. If you hold down Option or Alt, you can click on the effects and drag them to the other layer, and it'll actually make a duplicate of those options on the other layer. So now here in my calendar year, I've got my color overlay and my drop shadow. Now it's important to note, if I go to my years layer and toggle the visibility off and on, you can see this was never really editable text. But you can convert Photoshop text into editable text inside of After Effects if it was originally editable. Now, since all of this was created from a JPEG, that's just not the case. But I wanted you to understand that, so there it is. I'm going to go up under File, and I'll choose Save As. And I'm sure you'll already see this in your PSD, but since I haven't saved it yet, you can't see it here. But I'll go ahead and call this 02_02 extracted _ style _AE, and we'll leave it as a Photoshop document with layers, and we can embed the color profile. So when I click Save, that's going to go ahead and save that. So if I go back to my After Effects project, I can double click in the project panel, navigate to that new _style version by clicking once on the file, and then import it as a composition retaining layer sizes. When I click Open, again, I want to make sure my editable layer styles are selected, and I can click OK. Now if I double click that comp, you can see I have each of the different layers just like I had before. But now let's say here on the snow year, if I want to make some adjustments to that layer, I can open up the options and notice in addition to transform, I have my layer styles. So if I open up my layer styles here, sure enough, here's my drop shadow. It's actually enabled. If I come down here to color overlay, sure enough, it's enabled. So let's just turn off the color overlay so it continues to match the key. But I do like the drop shadow, so I'll leave that on there. Let's collapse layer 1. We can do the same thing with layer 2 under its layer styles. Let's just turn off the color overlay, but we'll leave the drop shadow on. So when it comes to actually importing and animating Photoshop documents inside of After Effects, a lot of the data will transfer. The transparency or opacity of layers, blend modes between layers, even layer styles themselves. And if you have editable type inside of Photoshop, you can actually select those layers and go up under Layer and convert to editable text. It just won't do anything for this specific instance because this text was flattened into the background.